päästään joustavasti näitä sitten katsoa, vaikka jälkikäteen pääsee liittyä mukaan. Jos jonkun pitää nyt kesken tämän koulutuksen tänään esimerkiksi sit lopettaa, niin tämä sitten tallennetaan ja Teemu laittaa toimistolta sitten siitä linkin. Ja sama noissa muissa, että jos ei pääse kaikkiin näihin 4, jotka on nyt 2 tämän vuoden puolella, seuraava ensi viikolla ja sitten 2 on tammikuussa, niin sitten ne pystyy aina katsoa jälkikäteen. Mutta toivottavasti mahdollisimman moni pääsisi tähän kokonaisuuteen, eli tarkoitus tosiaan, että Martin Joyce esittelee kohta itsensä, niin on tässä niin kuin meillä vetäjänä, mutta periaatteessa tämän tarkoitus on kehittää suomalaista valmennusta, suomalaista golfia ja niin miettiä yhdessä että mitä keinoja kukin tarvii siihen, että pystyy olemaan parempi coachi ja toimia paremmassa toimintaympäristössä, eli PGAn ja Golfliiton yhteistyöprojekti, että saataisiin tätä niin kuin viettyä eteenpäin ja nimenomaan meidän niin kuin jäsenet, eli jotka olette siellä linjoilla, niin teidän ääni kuuluviin ja tämä vuoropuhelu sitten taas niin kuin vastaavasti esimerkiksi Team Finlandin ja PGAn välille niin kuin paremmaksi ja niin, että koko aika kaikki puhalletaan yhteen hiileen. Ja tässä tosiaan niin ihan käytännön juttuja, eli pidetään mikrofonit mykistettyinä tämän ajan. Jos tulee puheenvuoro, niin laittakaa tuonne chattiin, eli voi laittaa kesken kiinni, laittaa sinne, että olisi kysymys, niin sitten päästetään mikrofoni ääreen. Toki sinne voi myöskin kirjoittaa ihan sen kysymyksen, niin voidaan käydä siinä loppuosa on varattu sitten sellainen 15-20 minuuttia lopussa ihan sitten kysymyksille. Toivottavasti tulee kysymyksiä, kirjatkaa ylös, mutta voi toki keskeyttää, eli chattiin sitten aina viesti, jos on joku tietty juttu, niin käydään se läpi. Eli keskustellen ja mielellään mahdollisimman paljon kysymyksiä, että ei millään tavalla yksin puhelu, että näin pitää tehdä, vaan nimenomaan, niin kuin sanoin, niin tällaista yritetään saada nimenomaan vuoropuhelua käyntiin. Mutta mä annan seuraavaksi sanan Pitkäsen Jussille. Eli Jussi on tässä ollut vahvasti mukana ja Martin on Jussin pitkän ajan tuttu, niin Jussi osaa sitten vielä kertoa paremmin vähän taustoja ja muuta. Mutta tervetuloa vielä kerran kaikille ja ei muuta kuin toivotaan, että osallistaa aktiivisesti. Mutta ole hyvä, Jussi.
No, kiitos Hänkki ja tervetuloa kaikille ja tosi makea nähdä porukkaa linjoilla. Ja tosiaan mun näkökulmasta, mä muutan kieltä kohta englanniksi, niin saadaan meidän asiantuntija myös mukaan tähän, mutta tosiaan tarkoitus tässä on hyvin yksinkertainen ja saada meille, niin kuin Hänkkikin mainitsi, niin parempaa yhteistyötä PGAn ja Golfliiton valmentajien kanssa ja kaikkihan me tehdään sitä sitten kehitystyötä yhdessä, eli pelaajien kehitystyötä, että miten me saadaan sitä entistä tehokkaammaksi. Ja tämä on yksi keino, mitä mietittiin, että pystytään jakamaan tietoa maailmalta. Tosin jos kysymyksiä ilmenee, niitä voi esittää suomeksi sekä englanniksi, niin saadaan viesti perille ja keskustelua käyntiin. Ja tosiaan mun rooli on Team Finlandin naisten ja tyttöjen valmentaja ja olen ollut siinä mukana nyt vajaa 2 vuotta ja tosiaan tarkoitus tässä on erilaisen verkostojen kautta sitten auttaa tätä koko meidän valmennusyhteisöä kehittymään. So without further ado, Marty will bring you in also. Welcome all the way from Australia late at night. Thanks for being with us and just explaining to all the guys online about what we're going to do over the next kind of 4 sessions. What the purpose of what we're going to do is we've got 4 sessions lined up for everybody. First one today, we're just going to have a look at, with your help, about what happens here in Finland in terms of a player development structure, more from the point of view of the Golf Union Golf Federation. We'll have a look at what happens elsewhere in the world with your experience with Golf Australia, Golf Victoria, which arguably has been one of the top talent development environments in the world. Next week, we're going to have a look at a couple of player case studies, which you've very kindly agreed to share with us, some players that have developed through work with their own coach, also through Golf Victoria, Golf Australia, and how that has worked. We'll also include a player reflection, self-assessment, which we'll go through to try and kind of identify where we are as a community, and where some of the opportunities are for us. Session 3 and 4, we will review some of the information that the coaches involved give us. You're also going to take us through some of the systems and the different technologies that you've used and you've seen used to develop in player development successfully. And finally, we're going to do a coaching case study with Kevin Kirk, who most of you will know is coach to Patrick Reed, amongst others, Graham McDowell, currently 5 Olympians, golf Olympians, and multiple major champions. And he's going to take us through his approach to developing players and how he uses the team approach to get the most out of his athletes. And I guess for everybody involved, I mean, that one of the main goals, as I said, is for us to find out is what we can all do better, and also then to bridge the gap between, which is often the case, between personal coaching and also the coaching structures that are in place at Golf Union, Golf Federation level, and how they've been dealt with elsewhere as well. So overcoming some of those challenges. So as an introduction, Marty, we've been through this, and I know you're going to take us through some of the information from down under. But just as a very brief outline, I mean, we can see here what we have is just the general pathway from the bottom left all the way to the top right. On the bottom level, we've got all the different tours that our players compete on. Then on the top level, we've got kind of starting at club level, academy, regional coaching, moving into the national teams, the juniors, the Team Finland Academy. There's some high school, regional high school coaching groups. We've also got service provision for players serving in the Defence Forces. Next step would be the national teams, the amateur representative teams, then into the pro team, which you guys I think call the rookie program, all the way into the Olympics, Olympic team, and also then competing at majors. So at the heart of it all, some of the core guiding principles that we have would be that we're supporting the player's individual coaching process in the middle of all of this. So at no stage do we try and kind of take over anything, but try and offer the best support we can for the players during their journey, all the way from grassroots to hopefully major level. Some of the guys online will be familiar with more familiar with this than others, and something from Team Finland Golf Union point of view, we're trying to make a better effort is to get this into the public domain and try to get people more familiar with how the system per se works. But we'll come back to this at a later stage. So I guess without further ado, I wanted to kind of introduce the main speaker, Martin Joyce. Marty, fortunate to call the man a friend, but also a coaching colleague. I'm going to let you kind of do the main introduction, but basically you've been involved in golf coaching for a long time, in high performance coaching for a long time, both in Australia, but also coaching for a long time on a lot of the world's major tours, and yourself being around some very influential people in the world of golf instruction, golf coaching, and been fortunate that you've been able to share some of your experiences with not only myself but also the guys here in Finland. So do you want to give us a little bit of background, Martin, on kind of your brief journey to date, and then we'll kind of get into the meat and bones of how things work elsewhere also.
Obviously, you guys can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Cool. Well, first of all, absolute honor and privilege to be able to have an opportunity to do this, not just obviously this one, but obviously, you know, with the four of us that have been involved in the last few weeks, trying to kind of organise what does it look like over the next sort of 4 sessions, and then the time frame and some structure around it, which I think I haven't personally done something like this anywhere in the world. I had a discussion with one of my colleagues today when I was coaching about kind of what I'm doing, and he's like, well, how come the Australian PGA aren't doing that with you for our coaches? And I was like, well, that's pretty much what happens. Most of my work, I guess for the guys and girls in the room, most of my work is globally. I work internationally for most of the year, go back and forth from Australia, which is obviously a long way to go to get to Europe or the US. Been very fortunate that, I guess, in early days, one thing that, if anyone that, a very close friend of mine, Ramsey McMaster, I was a little understudy, not from a physio point of view, but I was his guinea pig from a physical point of view and a development point of view, that I was in every single program, which is kind of like what we're looking at on the screen right now. Is I went through all those programs to the point that I started, and Ramsey used to say that I was institutionalized my whole life. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the fact that I kind of, in a nice way, I guess, that I was involved in trying to understand where it all fits for me, and as a player, then obviously get into the coaching role. I played on tour for a bit. For me, the tour life, obviously that's all I wanted to do, because that's what you do is, growing up, that was my pathway. I wanted to be the best player in the world. And, but I was traveling sort of, 20, 30 weeks a year and earning okay money without, I got to a point where I couldn't justify, you're going to spend that time away from home, with a young family and kids, and it just didn't make sense to me. So obviously, even when I was playing, I was coaching guys on tour, which was kind of a weird one where, I'm dealing with my own game, trying to help out someone else's game. So, but obviously the journey that's kind of been, I've been very, very fortunate, through Ramsey, though, and for people that don't know him, was golf physio that unfortunately passed away from us about 6 years ago. That he introduced me to a lot of great people around the world, which a lot of you guys would know if I mentioned their names. I'm been fortunate that I've been around some of the best systems in the world, and then I had the opportunity to be the head coach of the Victorian Institute of Sport, which I was a scholarship holder at the Institute of Sport for 4 years. So I kind of knew what the system was and what was in place before I became head coach, which is quite different to a lot of roles where they haven't sort of been they're coming in with obviously their own ideas and concepts. So I had a pretty clear pathway of kind of, this is where I see things relative to what I see that's around the world. And then I traveled the world and knocked on everyone's door. I remember, first meeting UC in Scotland.
Turnberry.
Where was that? Turnberry.
Yeah.
Hitting some bunker shots on the range in Turnberry. Yeah.
That's right.
That's a million years ago. So I guess the journey that I've been very, very fortunate that I've kind of been around the planet for many years, and I can call upon, you know, recognized coaches as good friends, and I hope that they see vice versa. You know, we've got a group of sort of really close coaches that we can ask questions about thoughts and beliefs. And Evan, for everyone's involved in this over the next sort of 4 sessions, that we've actually asked some of the best coaches in the world their opinions on kind of where we see what we're delivering, and some of the questions that we're going to produce or introduce over the period. So, you know, very fortunate that, you know, we can get that type of feedback, which is, you know, for most people have to read it in a newspaper or an article. So, you know, let's see kind of where it all goes. Obviously, there's a bit of a theme that goes from week to week, and I think that, yeah, I guess from a PGA point of view, I think, which is, you know, been just fantastic, the thought that, you know, we're all trying to open our minds to see what we can deliver. So part of the assessment stuff, which I think is really important, is there's many coaches in this room that have some skills that we're not aware of. And there might be some skills that they feel that they need to get better to, if the pathway is trying to develop high performance athletes, that, you know, that they need more assistance on. So from a, say, Team Finland point of view or a Finland point of view, it'd be great to see kind of what is the response on that. And then how can we tailor better information to help you guys become better coaches? And that's not saying that we've got all the answers either. But I'm very big on that, and one thing I've said to the guys in the last few days, and I know there's a chat room. I'm not completely aware of all the whole webinar stuff through Zoom, how it works, but at any stage there's any sort of, you know, something that comes up, you got a question about, want to press pause for a second and have a discussion. I really would like that, and I'll be very upfront. If I don't have the answer for that right now, I'll do my best to try and find it. So, Use, does that all make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, again, just, you know, I kind of mentioned it earlier on, but, you know, one of the main purposes here is to kind of find out where we as a community can get, you know, where our opportunities might be. You know, we're going to have a look at maybe some of the challenges. And I guess historically, you know, for better or worse, we've always, not just here, but I guess the challenge everywhere really is between, you know, the players in the middle. You've got a personal coach who's probably the most important person in that young athlete's kind of development. You've also got the federation, golf union, development programs doing the work they do. So looking at this very selfishly, and, you know, what I'd really like to get out of this is and some help with is how that kind of triangle can become better. Because I mean, ultimately we're all in it for the same thing, which is trying to make players better. So, so I guess kind of neatly kind of moving on from there is, you know, you've had a little bit of an introduction as to what what we do, where we're trying to get to. You know, we've had a few discussions. You know, you were kind of kind enough to give us some of your time this time, actually pretty much this time last year.
So 12 months ago.
That's 12 months ago. Yeah. Where you kind of opened up a little bit to us about some of the things that you guys have done over there. So, I mean, kind of if we get into it, and you kind of give us your view on you know, where I guess where you see where we are and where, you know, kind of where you've come from and how they interact.
Yeah, I guess in some ways, without obviously living and working within, you know, any country or any system, you don't really know kind of exactly what it is. But obviously, Use and I, we speak all the time, and in the nicest way, you know, we're sponges to each other. That, you know, when he has a shit day, he's happy to call me and you know, have a, you know, which I think as coaches that you make sure you got that type of support network around, that you can have those days that you can go, you know what, whatever it is, it's not great. But I tell you, in some ways, I'm not saying it works, so it definitely doesn't work for every kind of region or every country, but one thing that's been very strong over the years is that basically there's no one, say, I'm just talking about, say, golf in Victoria, which is a similar population, and I need to get the numbers right relative to golf population, but a similar sort of number in living population to what Finland has. We know that, you know, obviously the weather and climate is much different. So there's obviously stuff that we'll talk towards the end around that. But in the 20 odd years that the Victorian Institute has been running and the golf program's been in it, it's been literally one of the only non, up until recently with golf being the Olympics, only non-Olympic sport that's survived the 20 odd years that it's been there. And I guess a lot of the reason is that we've produced, with that program, has produced tournament winners. There's no one that has not gone through kind of the pathway, if you want to call it, that hasn't gone on to be successful as and obviously you know, have a job and go on in the future. So it's definitely not saying that that's the only way to do it. We just know that you know, we put the kind of best people in place. And I think a little journey of what Jussi just said before, that a great example is a guy that I met many years ago. His name's Grant Fields, and you probably don't know of him, but he coaches Cameron Smith. And Grant Fields first came along to a camp down in Victoria that we were running, and he was like a deer in headlights. He had just absolutely no idea. There's 3D going on, there's physical screenings, I could just see that he's like, what is all this stuff? I got this he's a 14-year-old kid, Cam, great player, great talent. And one thing that was really impressive by him was that he really embraced. He saw that this was a great opportunity, as a learning opportunity for him to become a better coach, to be around all this type of information. And I'm not saying that we made him a great coach, and Cam became a great player because he was around it. But obviously, I like to think that we all had a pretty big influence on, not that he finished second in the Masters a few weeks ago, but the pathway was there, and he's now become the head coach in a similar role to what I was doing in Queensland, and is, you know, a great guy that's in a you know, really positive position, that he completely understands what it took to take a 14-year-old, you know, kid to nearly winning a major at this point, and it's obviously won a couple of times on tour and everything else. So that's a great kind of little story about kind of, you know, how ideally, you know, the systems can work. And I guess in some ways, in a nice way, I'm no longer within the programs as such, and I'm working with players that are obviously within the players. So I'm kind of for some of the coaches that are in the room tonight, I'm in kind of your position to some degree, kind of how that looks and how that affects our business and whatnot. But just to give you sort of a rough idea, this is sort of where I left things. A couple of years ago, we sort of, this is probably more for, and it's kind of similar to what was just presented before, it's probably more for parents, players, than anyone else, to kind of get an understanding of what does it look like to develop, you know, an athlete within Finland, with an athlete within, say, Golf Victoria. And then understanding from a coaching point of view, where do we all sit, and kind of, what is our strengths and our weaknesses. And one thing I learned pretty quickly was that, and this was Pete Cowan told me this years ago. I used to work at a program in Belgium where Thomas Dietrich and Thomas Petrie and Dietrich came through. That he was very advocate. He said he wanted to retire for the last 15 years, but that he thought that the best coaches had to be in development. So that was a mindset that I took on board really early as a young, I guess, head coach, to go, well, okay, not saying I've got all that information, but my time is going to be best spent working at the lowest level. It sounds a bit wrong, but at the earliest levels. So we had obviously we had like an entry level, which is your baseline, probably kids from about 5 till about 12 years old, where there's junior tournaments set up. There's a Stuart Appleby Foundation, which I don't know if you guys know Stuart Appleby. He's won, multiple times on the PGA Tour, been very successful he was a VI scholarship holder, and he's put a lot of money back into golf in Australia, or golf in Victoria, and set up a foundation to run junior tournaments and whatnot, which has been a great starter into where we got to. And as it turned out, ironically enough, the guy that the head administration guy that ran the Stuart Appleby Foundation ended up working with me later in life, I guess. So he was able to kind of literally flow through. He knew these kids from 5, 6, 7, 8 to all of a sudden now they're 19, 20. So the information and the relationships with the parents and everything else for a long period of time was just amazing. So, and then obviously we got club level, which is where I guess a lot of us from a business point of view sit on a day-to-day, and obviously a pennant, which is like an interclub competition, which is where we start to look at players' performances, I guess, and then start to track those performances. And then obviously we have an Ivor Witten system, which is a junior and a senior tournament system there, where we start to monitor literally those performances. From a regional point of view, we have this is where I started, where I actually was a part of a district which was about 3.5 hours away from where I live. I would go down there every sort of 3 to 4 weeks and spend 2 days working with the regional academies. So that's where I really sort of got a better understanding of kind of what happens for us in the country, and the I guess the restrictions, the information, the constraints of kind of trying to develop these type of athletes out there. And we had which was challenging, no doubt. Obviously, our sport codes are very different. We've got AFL, and we've got soccer as well. So football it's a little bit different over here, but so we have in those, and netball for the females, we have a lot of different codes that are competing for these type of kids as they develop and they had a lot of good programs in those districts, in those schools. So I know that back then we put quite a bit of money in putting some of the better coaches that we had around into those areas to kind of help feed, I guess, these players into better programs and develop them into further up the train. So at state junior level, that's where a lot of the camp situations that I worked in. So I started running under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, under 18s, and then we had an open, which basically that was the VIS camp. So I'd be across those age groups. We do 4 a year, most of them with between 1 to 2 days per year, where we would have pretty much my full team of what I would work with at the Institute of Sport. So my head physio, my head psych, 3D, the whole lot would be involved at those underpinning levels. So the parents, the players, everyone was already early exposed. Obviously, the information that we delivered to under 12 to an 18-year-old is going to be quite different. For a lot of it, might be just capturing information, capturing data that we can actually then look at as they continue to develop and grow. The elite junior, that's where we started to look at, we put some squads in place, where actually training squads in place. So between the elite junior and the state level amateurs, that's where we had obviously the VIS program where the players would be with me for about 30 to 40, about 30 hours a week. And then we had an EPP, which is a development program that sat underneath that, which those players would be 20 to 20, maybe 20 plus hours a week. So, so there was a lot of contact time. And I'll go into kind of the coaching structure of kind of how we set that up. But so as you can see, as obviously it gets to that kind of more into that really pointy end, I would say that state level amateur end was where the real chunk and the art of development was formed. The patterns were formed. As it gets pointier, where we've got the national elite amateur, that's more where I guess for say Team Finland would pick teams from the back of those, those players that we were able to produce. So they were able to, in a nice way, pick the best players that we had going. And then it's probably going on about, geez, it could be about nearly 10 years. We had very fortunate, we had a rookie program set up where we have a sponsor that puts in $1 million a year, Australian dollars, so Australian pesos. I don't know what the currency conversion is, but our athletes that are fortunate enough to be part of that program, depending on where they are in their development and what they need, they could get up to about $100,000 per year. And then there would then be case managed over, they've got an opportunity over 5 years. So 5 years of turning pro. So you could have, Lucas Herbert, who won on the European Tour earlier this year, in his first 12 months, he wasn't in it. He was doing, anyway, it's probably another story, another time that we can talk, but he was then available when obviously he was showing more the signs that he was doing the right stuff, that was trending in the right direction. That then he was then made, he was available for financial support. And even this year, he's still getting very little financial support, but he's within the system. And I think if you look, I think he still advertises on his golf bag and on his shirt that he's a Golf Australian high performance athlete. So yeah, that gets to the real pointy end of kind of what they need in their case. Every athlete has a different case study of kind of where they're at and what they're required. I found I've had many players that have gone through there and they've just literally every single player has different needs. I have a player that, for him to play well, he's living now on the other side of the world. He actually needs to see his family more. So they spend money on his mum coming over and spending time, or his dad coming over, or his brother coming over, because that has a massive influence on how he performs. So influencing performance at the pointy end I find it's got very little, if everything's done really well going underneath, it's got very little to do with the kind of technical information that we deliver as coaches. It's all the others. So I guess in some ways that kind of gives you sort of an awareness of kind of where that sits.
Marty, can I throw in a question here for a second?
Please, yeah, please.
Just, I guess it's, it's just kind of on what you just said there. Your last point is, if for example, we've got all sorts of different structures, but ultimately they're all looking to do the same thing, right? Just produce players at the pointy end. So for you, in your experience and what you've seen around the world, I mean, what is kind of the one thing that's most central to a great development program? You don't have to, you can if you want to think about it. I'm just curious, kind of.
I think I need to think about it a little bit more, and I might get back to you a little bit more about that question. But I think time is massive, and time being that time with an athlete, time with a coach, time with a service provider, time with a team. I get this all the time. I was watching a young kid play soccer the other day. He's been selected to one of the professional. He's 13 years old, and the parents are all excited, and they're like, oh, and I'm watching him train, and they're like, oh, you know, what's your thoughts? I said, there's time. I said, and he can't buy it. He's 13 years old. What are you going to do? Like, as long as you put the best information in front of him over a long period of time, you hope to think that, and the buy-in is there, that, you know, these athletes or these players will go on, and coaches will go on to, you know, to all get better. I think if you were to say one thing that I did personally that I think I did very, very well for a long period of time was creating a training environment and that culture around that training environment. I think the buy-in needs to be, you know, I had a really high expectation on whoever turned up on the day, and I still do. Even with the players that I work with now, there's a minimum requirement of kind of where you sit, and obviously our relationships have grown over time. But you get down to that kind of, you know, squad or camp environment. I'm not saying I'm a Hitler on the boot camp type stuff, but there's definitely a theme and an expectation of kind of what is required from me as the head coach, what is required from the athlete, and then I was very big on what is required on the service providers and the coaches around us. So I think we spoke about this. I've done a lot of 360 reviews on all of us at a lot of the camp sessions where, you know, I give them an opportunity to question what we do, how we do it, and vice versa. So, yeah, I think that I need to think about that question a little bit more, but I think if you can influence anything, the most would be your training environment. And I think we've all been around stuff that looks, it doesn't have to be within golf, but you look at it and on the outside and going, this is high quality, this is world-class quality. And then we've been to stuff where you could have somewhat the best people in the room, but look at it going, this is really disorganized and just, you know, the information might be great, but it's not working. That's my thought. For now, I'll give you some more thought later. This was more of a slide, once again, for the parents, but kind of starting to understand, if you look at the pyramid going that way, it's now sort of the baseline stuff of where it works. And then obviously down this little left-hand side, which is talent ID, so under 12s, VRS, which is the regional camps, which Evan, up until when I finished, I wouldn't go out to the regions as much. I had my assistant coach in a different program was running the regional stuff, but we ran a regional weekend where we got all the regions in, where we did literally train like a tour pro type stuff, where we got all the providers from the VIS, where we fully screened, went through. They then, because each region have their own institutes to some degree, if you want to call it, where they had their own S&C coaches, physios and everything else. So all those physios, all the S&C coaches, everyone came in. So that gave a great learning opportunity for S&C coaches that live 3 hours away to kind of work with the institute coaches, vice versa. The physios will come in, the coaches will come in, we could all talk and discuss. So it was a great little network of development, not just for the players, but for the coaches and the service providers. And then, as you can see, sort of kind of the feeding system to where we put in the underpinning squads all the way through to kind of the VIS, and where the GA squad in Golf Australia, that's where kind of the rookie stuff sits. It kind of sits above it, but the reality is without, which is like, and you guys, I'm not too sure. We've got states here, countries have provinces, regions, so on and so on. A lot of the selection stuff, at national levels, is taking the Cam Smith out of Queensland and the Zach Murray or players out of Victoria to form into what would be a GA squad or a rookie program. So hope that I know it kind of displays probably a little bit different, but I hope that all makes sense in kind of what we're looking at. And as I say, you know, at any point, if anyone, if it doesn't have to be vocal now, but it could be a question or an email later that we can go through some stuff and have that chat around that. This is, I think, till this day, I still think this is probably one of the most important images that I came across when I first got the head coaching role at the Institute of Sport, and the CEO at the time brought me into the boardroom, and this still sits to this day in the boardroom, and pretty much this was a tough day, as I literally just got the job, so I was very excited, very pumped, and posted up in the boardroom and said, you know, what's your thoughts about, what does this mean to you? And I'm sitting here, well, you know, I'm looking at it from the inside out, going, well, obviously athletes first, and then the coaches, and then obviously then from there, with, you know, as we look through that, you got the performance, you got the marketing services, you got a big network of people around it. And he said, he goes, Marty, at any single stage that you think, A, you're more important than the athlete, or B, you're not thinking of the athlete first, I want you to quit. So I just got the job. This is day one. I was like, this is brutal. I just wanted to go in a dark corner and cry. But I completely, absolutely agree to this day that, and even on tour, we get this, you know, there's coaches, and people can say that about me, there's coaches and service providers and managers and stuff that they try to make them so you know, their job so important that they're actually losing sight of kind of what's important, which we all not, if we don't have that athlete in front of us, or if we don't have that golfer in front of us, you know, our jobs don't exist. So I think for me, from a development model point of view of what's important, I think through their careers, parts of this stuff is more important than not. But I think the most important thing out of kind of, hopefully you guys get out of this, is that, you know, and at any single stage that you wake up and you know, you're not thinking of trying to help that athlete get better, or not that you would, but you think you're more important than an athlete. You know, I think it's not fair on that athlete that you continue to work with he or she, because you know, that model just I just can't see how it could work. So that's my little, I know it's a bit deep and spiritual about that, but that was something I was introduced very, very early, and even now I'm no longer working within the system. I still think that's probably one of the most important things that I still look at, even when I continue to coach the pros on tour or the people I'm with. It's all about what we deliver to help that athlete get better. How I set up and I just came up with this just on the back of having a discussion with use, you know, kind of the structure around that format was obviously me as head coach, but I wanted to expose myself as much as I can to all areas of that development. So me as head coach, I would go down to, I just spoke about kind of the regional coaching with the VRAS. And then one thing I did was my assistant coach at the Institute of Sport, I'll tell a funny story. He's an older guy that he only wanted to coach guys. He only wanted to coach guys on tour. And he's a very good coach, European tour player for about 10 years, went on tour. And he's like, no, I'm not interested. He's a funny character. I'm not interested in coaching females. So I made him the women's coach. And we had a couple of funny phone calls, a couple of discussions about kind of why you're doing this to me. And I says, like, well, I know you're a great coach, and you need to be challenged to be a better coach. And I think this is a great opportunity for you. So I actually got him to be the women's and the girls coach. And then he then ran independently of that, the underpinning women's programs around that. And then fortunately, you know, over time has now been able to coach women players that have won on you know, the ladies European tour and play in the US and so on. So, you know, I feel like I I helped him. I probably didn't really know what I was doing at the time when I said it. I just thought that he needed to be challenged. But more importantly, the structure behind it was that we had a head coach. The head coach of the institute had no correlation to the men's team or the state team. He just sat independent. So when I sort of was fortunate to get the job, I said, well, the coaching structure has to change. I need whoever's the head coach. Doesn't matter if it's Marty Joyce or whoever's in the room. That person needs to be involved from head coach through to regional under 12 development. And it doesn't have to be direct contact, but it has to have an absolute, that a parent or the pathway is very, very clear that this person's going to be able to see me all the way through to whenever, you get into those programs. Vice versa, that's why I set up with the assistant coaching role to then streamline the women's development as well. So that was my thought. That was the biggest missing link that we had when the VI started, and the coaches that were involved, they were sitting over here with a great program, and the rest of the state was doing their own thing over here with a state coach that wasn't communicating with the head coach. And there was that goes back to, I was even playing. I was there as a player, wanting to be in that program, and was up against this coach over here, and there was conflict. And it just, as a player, just, you're trying to be friends with everyone. And it was, there's a lot of conflict and just didn't make sense. So that's one of the first things I did when I first got the role, was that I had to streamline that whole process. Here's something, this is me just trying to be clever with stuff. This is what you do when you're locked down for how many months that I've been in. So there's obviously, there's
270 days, I believe.
Yeah. My hair should be longer than this. We didn't have hair. But I guess the part that we look at is probably more for, it's for all of us, but to develop a high performance athlete that goes into, running his or she's own business, that, the middle bit that I know it's sideways is having a team, and that team and what's around that team, that's going to move and flow and change over the years, but making sure, there's stuff in there that's quite easy for some of the coaches, around probably equipment. There's probably many coaches in the room that are great club fitters. Make sure you got the best, equipment in the players' hands, but understanding, who is the physio that or chiropractor or whoever you use that. My big thing is that I've had the same, and I was actually with my physio this afternoon with a player that I've worked with since he was 14 years old. And the fact that we've seen this physio sees this guy ideally it was 4 times a year, but every single year for four times at least. That's just from a screening point of view, not a treatment point of view, that this person sees this guy's body, in this case, it's now been 10 years. So, we're going back on video and going back on images of kind of where it's all trending, how he's moving, what's been great. And now he's become the boss. So, how does he now run his own journey? So I think, the important part is that, to be a part, you don't need to know it all, but to develop an athlete to the pointy end of where we're trying to get them, you need to be across a lot of obviously the information that's on that page there. And then this is, I guess this is, and there's no different, obviously it's different in, from country to country, but, it's so easy to say, there's challenges that, we've got that you can't, we're not able to get better at what we do because of climate. Right now for you guys, there's obviously, a lot of how cold is it right now there, Use?
It's around kind of 0, 1 degree, 2 degrees, not a lot of daylight.
Not like that, yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then with that, obviously, you've got, you know, then the training environment completely changes, where it all obviously turns into indoor. You know, that has its constraints. Obviously, over time now, you know, with TrackMan and 3D and force plates and stuff, there's probably more technical information that you're able to deliver. But, you know, there's the obviously challenges that are there. I actually think I used to work in a program in Belgium for about 5 years. It's probably not quite the same climate, but definitely seasonal. And that's one thing that I kind of really struggled with when I first went over there, was that they kept talking about their on-season and off-seasons, where in Australia, we never had an off-season. We competed all year round, from, you know, tournament golf all the way through. And which sounds fantastic, but if you look at early years of development, having that opportunity on an off season, it could be a physical component to it or a technical component to it, that you guys can actually, you know what, it's not about results right now. It's about kind of just getting better at whatever you guys come up with. I think that's a massive influence. To some degree, I think we've had, it sounds a bit, some of the best players that I've worked with, if they got injured and they weren't able to travel and compete, were able to implement some real, you know, good influence in physical improvements and physical changes and technical changes, because they knew they couldn't travel and compete. So, you know, one thing that I think that we look at, I know countries, when I've been over and worked over different countries around the world in those climates, they go, well, you know, we're stuck because we can't travel, we can't do this, we can't do that. But I think if you look at it in a positive way, relative to their schedule and their development, I think there's a great opportunity to grow and improve a lot of those areas that are, you know, they've been flagged up through, you know, through the physio, the S&C, or the biomechanical, or the home coaches, or whatever it may be. So I think, you know, some of that part, I think it is an absolute definite challenge that, you know, you can't get out on the golf course and play, you know, all year round. But we know there's many other countries that are going through that. I think probably one of the biggest challenges that we had to some degree out here, which I know you guys are faced with over there, is college golf in the US. It's a bit of an elephant in the room, but is we had in Victoria, not as much, but throughout Australia, we had, because there wasn't programs like the Institute that were in place where they could see a pathway as developing as golfers, and they could also, you know, study in Victoria. They then looked at obviously the US college system, and we all know that it can look fantastic, and, you know, they tell a great story, but from a development point of view, which I would argue is probably the most important years of their ages, call it 18 to 23. Their technical development in most cases is really, really poor. So how does the home coach stay involved? How does the national body stay involved? Obviously, the PGA aren't involved at this point because they're not PGA members, or they're not tour members. But how does everyone stay involved in making sure that you're helping these players continue the development? And I know that setting up, and I think that's really important, what Finland Golf do, and setting up training camps maybe at the start of the year where you guys are able to train out. I think you were in Texas last year, and I know we've done stuff out. Yeah, you've been out in Houston. I know in the past, different countries, I've done stuff out in Orlando and everything else. I think that helps, but and then we're quite constrained because we're not able to visit the colleges. We're not. There's many things that we're not able to do that don't sit under the system or under the guidelines. So having, I think that's probably one of my biggest, one of the biggest areas where I think that we can, I still don't have a quite answer on how do we improve it, because I think how we improve it is having better communication or better knowledge of the college that these kids are going in and what their needs are. So if you got someone who's been in, someone who say, you know, is quite developed physically, who's 18, 19 years old, technically looking very, very good, really to fine tune their development is getting more playing opportunity, that could work quite well, and then putting them in a college there. But if you have a young player that, or you know, guy or girl that, you know, physically is, you know, we talk about their training age, you know, physically he's only been really in the gym for 1 year and, you know, going through a lot of stuff, and technically needs a lot of work to be done to give them the best opportunity to, you know, to fit in the pathway of, say, the rookie pros or whatever it may be. I think sometimes saying no to maybe a college program initially to work on that stuff, say post high school, and they can continue their education back in Finland, and then maybe look at maybe an opportunity moving in the I don't know enough about the years, but in their third or fourth year, more from a, you know, a playing opportunity world, and putting themselves around the best players, arguably some of the best players in the world. Competition's great. From that point of view, I think that can work well. But I think, yeah, I think it's so crucial for the coaches, you know, the home coach, the national body, to have obviously great communication with, if that's the pathway that's going to stay, really good communication with the colleges and the different type of environments that you're putting these kids in, because I've seen way too many. I haven't come across, from an Australian point of view, I haven't come across too many great success stories that have gone on to work out that well. There's one at the moment that Ryan Ruffles, who I used to work with, but Gab's, the fit works really well. The parents have moved to the US. She's at I think Stanford.
Southern California, I think.
No, ULC. She's in LA. But that was the same college that her mum went to, so they know everyone there. She's had her, you know, she goes down to her parents' house every weekend, which is, you know, every other week, which is, you know, an hour or so away from where the campus is. She has a lot of contact with her home coach. She has a lot of contact with her sports psych that she works with. So her team hasn't really changed much. The environment hasn't changed, and the competitive environment hasn't changed, but everyone in the team is still very actively involved. So I think, I'm not saying that's how she's gone on to be, you know, quite successful early. There's obviously a lot of other factors in there, but I think that's a good story. That's probably one of the best stories I've can talk about from golf in Victoria or golf in Australia, probably over the last 10 or 15 years. From your end, in regards to kind of challenges that you're aware of, and for the coaches, and this is where I'm kind of interested in, for the coaches to kind of talk about some bits here as well, is that, you know, knowing what you know, what's in front of you, what do you feel like is, you know, the challenges, and are the, you know, what are those, is there opportunities within those challenges that, you know, you're actually in a much better place than you thought?
I mean, I would say from my point of view, in some cases, yes. You know, we you know, particularly on the last subject you talked about, we do get a lot of players heading over to the US. You know, players see it as an opportunity to develop their skills, their playing skills, their playing ability, but also to you know, to get a degree, get an education. Does everybody who goes there come back better? No. You know, some have gone on to become very, very good players. You know, a young lady at the moment, she's playing on the LPGA tour. She, you know, she went through the college system, stayed over there. So, you know, is it, you know, can we say it's good or bad? It's like everything, it depends. But the big point there for you that you made, I think, is choosing the right environment. And then kind of a question that's in my head is, you know, how can I pretty much work full time as a national body coach. How can I be of best value to kind of the player and the player's personal coach? I mean, you know, where do you see that? You know, and I know that's kind of the role you were in, and it's sometimes difficult, you know, at times kind of you know, in my own case, my, you know, ego sometimes gets in the way, and you know, you might think, you know, this is better and this is better, you know, but it's not necessarily the case. It's ultimately all comes back to what's best for the player. So, you know, any thoughts for you as to how you know, whether it's, you know, Team Finland coach or service provider or any of us that are involved in the program, how we can be of best value to the player and also the player's personal team?
Yeah. I think if you go back to that kind of VIS model, when I said athlete first, as long as I'd like to think that, you know, in the perfect world that we all wake up every day thinking about, we're just trying to make this athlete get better. But sometimes we know it just doesn't work that way. Where I know I've experienced it a lot, you know, where, you know, it's quite funny because I say I can only coach so many people. So a lot of times, a lot of home coaches would think I'm trying to take their player. The reality is I've got no interest in the player. I actually don't. I'm being a bit quite selfish now. I only work with people I want to work with. And this is me being quite selfish. I've gone past the point of trying to, you know, I only work with the people I think that are good people. So I've had players in the past that I just think they're just not great people, and I've actually sacked them before they sacked me. But I think the important part is that I think I guess in your role, use is that, you know, you're there to help and develop, and I think from a home coach's point of view, if you guys are really honest and unless, you know, I got so much, I'm learning stuff every day that I was like, it keeps racking my head. And I'm still miles away from, you know, kind of where I think I can be as a coach. So I think having people in that kind of head role for me as a home coach to be able to go, you know what, I need to kind of, I don't know enough about this stuff. You know, can you assist in this? Or, you know, and the head coach might go, well, I actually don't know enough about it either, you know, but let's look into, see if we can find those answers for you. So I think being a feeder to kind of information, I think is really important, and showing that you're there to support the athlete first, you know, obviously then the coach. And then, you know, the reality is, is a saying that a good friend of ours used that says it all, you know, so, you know, sometimes you got to have we say a shit conversation, is a bad conversation now as opposed to a shit conversation later. And a hard conversation now as opposed to a shit one later. But that being said, sometimes, you know what, there's something that's going on right in front of you. I had a moment today with my physio today I'm not happy with what's happening physically in the gym at the moment. And I'm going on history that I know that, you know what, I just don't think this is right for this player. So I'm going to have this conversation now with the S&C coach and the head coach. And I'd like to think that they're open to that information, because, you know, not saying I know it, but I know the players so well that I think that the information and the data that I'm using through 3D and everything else is not directly helping that player. So I think, that being said, I think for the coaches that are out there, the more, I guess in some ways, the more information that we have, the better it is. Sometimes it looks like it's just complete data. And excuse my accent. In Australia, we say data, which is D-A-R-T-A. The rest of the world say data. And UC and everyone around the world takes the piss out of me all the time. So I'm just going to say data because that's just how it comes out. But the more information that you can have on whatever it is in regards to the physical, technical, mental, whatever, that allows us to have better conversations as coaches, better communication back to, say, the national body, even from a PGA point of view, which is what we're talking about over the next sort of 3 to 4 sessions, is that, better information to go back to the PGA also on kind of how can we help assist the coaches get better to help better the players. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. We have a question here as well. How much of an issue of the age point of view is getting into a good college after high school and military service? So military service in Finland, and please somebody on the line correct me, it's typically between 18 and kind of 20 to 21. I mean, you can do it until you're 28, but typically the earlier you get it done, the better. Compulsory for males, but optional for females too.
Yeah. And then post, so what's the, then I said, I don't know, you guys being much more across the college system and the restrictions on what age you're able to, continue to get across there. So, in some ways that's a very different conversation. And a conversation I'll talk about an athlete that I worked out of a career that actually left the country not to do their national service. That ended up being number 1 amateur in the world. But the whole family left the country to give their child the best opportunity to go and pursue their career. So it's a it's a very, very and I'm just haven't been faced with that. I don't know, on the outside, I think some of the military stuff I think is fantastic in regards to kind of I know it's off topic, but in regards to kind of understanding how to the time that you got and how how hard to train and what you need to do to be better. I think some of that I would have loved to have some of that to some of the kids back in the day, but so I guess once again that's a challenge. I know this not the only country that's going through it. Personally, I don't have enough experience around it because I haven't grown up in that environment. But then from a college point of view, obviously there's kids that are then moving through into colleges in their early 20s. They're obviously able to get in, but how to some degree, it's how do you, from a use, if for someone who's in the national service that has to do their national service, it's 2 or 3 years, is that full time in there? Are they able to?
Depends on, I mean, it's typically up to about 12 months. Just depend on what kind of a unit you get into. I mean, some of the best athletes, they will get into a service stream, which is a little bit more respective of their practice times and playing. So it kind of allows them to continue doing what they're doing with a small interruption. But I mean, this is something that I can certainly look into with in more detail and get a more precise answer.
I've experienced that a little bit through the athletes I work from South Korea. That depending on their skill level, they were put into potential programs that they were able to continue to, not to the same level, but still have contact. But so I'll leave that answer to you, Use, because
I can take care of that.
Yep. Any other questions around that stuff? I've been told that people in Finland like to communicate, like to ask millions of questions, and if you like to turn yourself off mute, you can right now, and please ask a question. Have I got the wrong country?
Yeah, I think so.
Or the wrong humour?
Yeah. So I'm gonna come back to you on that. The one I asked earlier on is kind of the key thing to a great development program. Again, trying to look at it in terms of everybody who's online today, you know, kind of most of whom are personal coaches to a player or a number of players that are at differing stages of their development, but also maybe in kind of a junior squad, they may be in a pro squad, they may be you know, in some of the adult squads, or some maybe even starting out. So I mean, for you, kind of having been through it, having developed it, you know, if you had kind of one thing that you could transplant anywhere, what would it be?
You love the one thing, don't you?
Okay, well, two things, if it's easier, or maybe three, kind of the three kind of core things, you know, a couple of core things for you that are going to help everybody.
Yeah, I would say you put your best team, and the team needs to be, when we talk about the team, like the slide before, needs to have the best people that you have in your country or around the world that you've got access to around those coaches and those players. One thing that we did use, which I don't know if I told you years and years ago, it's a bit off topic, but when I got the role, so when the Golf Australia high performance director came to Australia, he wanted me to be the head coach for the country, and I said no. I was very happy with the role that I was at. But what we did do, which I thought worked very, very well, was so we brought my physio, which was Ramsey at the time, and my biomechanic, and we went around the country for about 3 or 4 years. So we set up, so we've got states. So we set up each state where we would come in, not to tell people what to do, but help and provide and educate the coaches, the physios, and everyone around them, the home coaches and everyone around. So we put the best people going around the whole country for 3 or 4 years. And to the point where, you know, it was like, you know, Marty, you need to go back to New South Wales. You got this camp coming on this weekend. I'm like, there's just no, like, they don't need to hear me anymore, because, you know, all their systems are in place relative to their constraints. They've got everything that's there. So, and then we formed which was called the Golf Bohemians, where we put, was then an independent, that went for a week, basically a week, where it was not just the Australians, but people around the world would come in and we shared information. So I think if you were to say what is probably the one thing, I would say put the best people around everyone you've got at the earliest age, and make sure you're going out of your way to develop those people, and they're all case by case, need different things. I think having a network of understanding of who those people are and what their strengths and weaknesses, I think is massive. And then having, it could be a day, could be 2 days, could be a week, no one, you know, it's very hard right now, but where everyone gets together and shares information. And I'm very big that I think, I was big on that one, where we all had to come up with our own case studies, and it could be developing a 12-year-old through what, you know, it could, there's many different ways you can look at a case study, and have everyone come up with their own sort of development, sort of where they've gone from, you know, 12 months ago I was doing this, I'm now here, my passion's now going over here. This is what I'm thinking, and so on. So I think the more you can put yourselves around each other, the better it is. But yeah, if you were to say, the one thing I'd say is putting the best people around the best programs and the best camp environments that you've got, and then the training environment as itself. I'll just turn my light on. It's got dark.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's dark. It's not 9 a.m. and still dark. So
yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, or do you need some more information?
No, I mean, that's I've got a few pages full of notes, but I think it's just a kind of, like I said at the start, and Hank said at the start, is how we can kind of as a PGA, as a golf federation, as a national program, how everybody can help each other with, that, and that's ultimately the goal that we all have. So it's kind of make player, or develop better players
and better people.
Correct.
I think that's the important thing, that in amongst all this type of stuff is we're dealing with humans, and I think if you're trying to become better humans, a lot of the other stuff you like to think kind of takes care. You put good information around good humans, things are going to work out pretty well. So I think the cool part in the process over the next little bit is it'd be quite interesting for the PGA and say Golf Finland, that there's people in this room that you potentially have no idea what some of their skill sets are, and like, geez, I had no idea that this person's been studying this and doing that, and that could be a great opportunity to for some of those athletes to do more of that type of stuff. So I think the cool part about the kind of little journey over the next sort of month or so is that coming out with kind of better idea where we all sit, and then more from, and Hank, you can talk about this more from a development point of view. How does the PGA help the members within the system? That there's many members, the PGA members, like back at home, where they're actually not interested in developing athletes. They're very, very happy with either working in a shop or running a golf course, or there's so many elements to be a PGA member, right? That it's just not their thing, and it's not their passion. But the ones that are interested, I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to kind of look at opportunities in the future to sort of help everyone get better.
Yeah, agree. And like we talked yesterday, it's kind of the PGA's point of view is to develop our coaches to be better, even though some are more oriented in high performance stuff and some are in just club level stuff. I think most of us are doing kind of a mixture of both. And then want to go more towards the high performance stuff, you have kind of the access to that stuff and training to be better on that side. And if you want a more, or vice versa, you could be both, concentrate on stuff that you need on daily basis, working with your club, you develop on that side. And I don't think that they are kind of they are, let's say, facing each other. They're more like understanding the high performance stuff can be brought to club level stuff as well. You just have to kind of adapt and see the person standing in front of you. Like I said, the player is always in the center, and even though if it's a tour player or just a beginner golfer, it's the same thing. It's about them and how to kind of take them in consideration. But also there's one.
Sorry, I'm
Hang on.
struggling to hear you, mate.
Sorry, just cut out.
In the chat, we can all go through that. Listening is one thing, is that there's been a lot of, but also or next week about the assessment and everything, but also that because there's lots of stuff going on in Team Finland, gathering data. I got it. So traveling to Australia, I have to learn the
change that accent.
But how do we kind of all the data that is being collected on like the national team camps and stuff like that, how do we bring that to our training in PGA for PGA members, and also how do we develop the club level training? I think that's kind of the whole thing that, like Jussi mentioned in the start, it's about the personal coaches, the club coaches that actually develop the players, and then how the support system, the national team or PGA training or whatever it is, supports that to be better and to give opportunities to develop as a coach and to make the most out of it. So
yeah,
I think
on that, I think our third session where we get a little bit more detailed on the back of the assessment document, and then talk about some of the technology and systems that are in place in helping develop players. And that could be, I use similar from just obviously scaled down at obviously club level versus say tour level, but I think I'm not saying I've got all the answers on that, but I'll go through in quite detail of kind of how I look at measuring and understanding how we can benchmark, if you want to call it, those type of players, and it could be at whatever age group or whatever skill set. The age group is probably not the best way of looking at it, more skill set, because you can have a 14-year-old that's been playing golf for 1 year and a 14-year-old that's been playing golf for 7 years. So I think the skill set's probably more important than anything. But I think that's as I said, I think as we go along, I think we'll get, especially on the back half of kind of what we look at in that third series, I think that's where we can get into a lot more detail of from a coach needs point of view, what are some of the systems they can take back to their own facilities, their own courses, working with some of the players and so on, which obviously use is across a lot of that stuff that I currently do anyway.
Cool. I think Pasi has a question or a comment for you, Mari.
Yeah, this is just a short reflection. Coming back a little bit to that, what's the, like you said, put it nicely, that what is the single most important thing? I think that's exactly kind of regarding of the understanding of the problem that we are actually facing, is that it's ever changing story. It's not like a linear logic where you only fix A to get every other alphabet get better as well. Because once you touch something, the only thing that you actually know is that something else will react to that, but nobody really knows how. It could be very, very good, solid guess that maybe this way, we hope that this would affect this way, but then something else will react to that also. So it's much more like a systemic thinking where everybody is sort of interrelated to everything, which I think this picture at the moment on the screen beautifully represents, that it's like overlapping seams of things. And in coaching, I think this could be for the PGA also, Hank, one of the kind of approaches, that what is the bridge between the elite playing and the club level thing, is that the basic problem is the same, that it's a human being who's playing, that it's not ever just the one single thing, that it's just something that is kind of the pathway to the different perspective of the problem, if I put it this way. It's kind of a
That's
different
deep.
way of looking
I love
at it. Yeah, but did you get what I mean? It's like a
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's like the human thing, it's evolving. So then the coach's role actually is just almost like the accompanying traveler. I mean, you just go along. and try to try to
Well,
understand.
you try to help manage the human.
Yeah. But this is actually kind of the Team Finland approach that we've been trying to now go towards, that we have different kind of approaches to the player. There is the physical screening, and there's physical training, and there's the 3D and whatever things that we try to put these pieces to kind of create the understanding that it's actually never just one thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's really important with when you look at information that's given. I had it going for a while there. I was doing some camps, and you know, every service provider is great, but they try to make what they do so important that, you know, the physio, it has to be this, and then whatever the bio, it has, you know. And I kind of sit here going, well, you know, everyone in the room is trying to be so important. Well, the reality is it's the person in front of you that's important, and making sure whatever that information is delivered is actually there to help them. You know, I think a lot of people, it's quite easy to kind of speak loud and say what you know. And that can be great because it sounds important and whatnot. But the reality is probably a lot of the time, a lot of the people that we work with need to know less. And us as coaches need to know what that page in front of us looks like to deliver the most minimal amount of information to an athlete to get their best performance. And I think going through, when I look at that, I kind of like to look at that. That looks like being on the road on tour. There's just noise and distractions. There's so much elements to performance that I think us as the home coaches and the coaches, that we need to go, okay, what can we filter through all this information that's going to help this player right now in time get better? And I think what you're saying there, I couldn't agree more. I think that's absolutely spot on. But I think the important part is understand the whole thing's always, as long as it's going forwards, that being forward, being up, but it's always shifting like this, you know, and as whatever pathway we go into, that it's, as long as you're not going backwards with stuff and you know, yeah, again, way out of kind of what makes you good. I think as long as everyone in front of you is working that way, I think you pretty much, no guarantee, you're pretty much going to get the best out of that athlete.
Yeah, I think, you know, Pia's got a good comment there on the chat. You know, better and open communication, not just between a player and a coach, but coaches and their support network. And, you know, mentorship would be a step forward as well. So, you know, I just spoke to Dr. Bull, who was over a couple of weeks ago, just doing a session with the coaches, and which I believe was well received. And we kind of talked about what we might do when he's over next time in February, would be to actually take some of the player case studies and go through them with a room full of coaches straight after. So, you know, everybody starts to kind of, you know, communicate and discuss things in the same language as well, which is, you know, particularly in the area that he's involved in. So.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds very good.
Yeah, cool. I think we're
any other questions?
Or comments? I think we're do you have anything to ask us, Marty, and like from your point of view? I mean, I know it's, you know, these can sometimes be one-way traffic, but maybe turn the tables the other way and, you know, give you a chance to kind of ask the room anything related to kind of,
yeah,
sorry to throw another curveball your way.
No, this is good. This is good. I didn't think this wasn't discussed, Jussi. What are you doing? I think in some ways, I guess, you know, everyone in the room is at a different stage and, you know, different time of their life doing whatever, you know, with everything that's going on. But is there, to some degree, is there ever, before we get into more information in the next few webinars, is there any, and it maybe doesn't have to be brought up now, but on the back of our conversation tonight, is there any questions? And that's why I like the idea of the Q&A stuff's important, but is there any questions or any thoughts for some of the coaches right now going, you know what, can you guys give me an answer around whatever? So my question back to, I guess, to you guys is that I'd love to hear maybe a couple of emails that go through to whoever, Hank, use, that might be off the record saying, hey, here's some thoughts on the back of what was presented. What about this type of information or understanding around some of this stuff? So I think in some ways that could be a nice way of starting, if that some of that stuff comes up, and we don't need to name names, we can just talk about it as a discussion, that we can go through some bits before we get into, obviously what we've already got planned.
Sounds good to me.
You happy?
Yeah, next session is Thursday the 10th.
Yeah, the 10th.
Yeah.
Same time.
Yeah.
Same time, yes.
Yeah. Same bat channel.
Yeah. So again, we'll go through, in that session, we'll kind of maybe have a quick recap. If any questions come up between now and then, any comments. Marty, you're going to talk about the journey of a couple of players that have been under your wing, and then
I'll just touch on for the guys, girls there. So I'm talking about amateur players that are now professional, but more the amateur journey that I have worked with former #1 amateur and a former #2 amateur in the world. One is no longer competing on tour anymore, and so there's and I use you've only because I love you that I'm having this conversation, because there's not too many. I've done many case studies around what is success and what does it look like. And I was asked by a close friend the other day if I could do something on this, and then you asked me as well. There's conversation, or there's information that I'm gonna bring up in the next one that I would, as best case scenario, keep it within the kind of collective group that is a part of what we're doing, because there's nothing I'm going to say that I'm not comfortable that this player is not going to hear, but it's about a story about a part of a story about a guy that no longer is competing as well. So I think as I said, it's very, very easy, and I've got many case studies I can show you, winners on tour every other year, but in some ways it's nice to hear potentially, not nice, it's hard to hear potentially the other side of it. So yeah, that's the only thing I say there, use is, just be quite mindful that, as we said before, we're talking about humans, and as good as it can be, it can also, there's a downside to kind of what we do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess on the back of that, we'll get into some of the self-assessment and kind of reflection on where we are as a kind of individuals and a group of coaches. So yeah, should be good.
Very cool.
So anything else on your mind, Marty or Jussi?
How much time you got?
So we have 20 minutes, so we have something.
I've always got something on my mind, Hank.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. I'm good. And as I said, just an absolute honor and privilege that I'm able to talk to everyone. And as I said, I'm here to help. I don't have all the answers, but I've obviously got a bit of experience in kind of what we're discussing, and I think most importantly that I've got a great network of people around the world that, if I think that's the cool part about coaching, is that we're faced with so many different things somewhat daily that come up, that we need that network of people around to say, what, geez, I'm faced with this, how do I deal with that? So I think as I said, I'm here to help. Absolute honor, and look forward to our next session next week.
Yeah, I think one question that Pia sent, the last one, I think it's like, this is kind of mentoring from you, so thank you very much, and getting started. And I think we're
Just cut out.
Of culture and coaching culture, we're really young, and I think we need these kind of sessions to kind of create our own culture. We can't and shouldn't copy any other culture, because we are, like you said, like our environment and all is pretty support that and see the like next stuff. But like questions on email or something, you have the next one. If you have something in mind, just please send me or Teemu to the office some questions, and we'll go through those then in the second session, or maybe on the later ones if they're more over there. So is there something on the chat? My mic is not working 100%. No, it's just my voice probably. Sorry, Pasi, I don't know what's wrong. So hopefully, and also the recording of this will be available probably this afternoon. So if someone missed the first part, we had some technical issues for a couple that were waiting in the room. So listen to the beginning. But anything else on mind? Any questions?
Going once, going twice.
Nice.
Sold.
Sold.
Okay, thank you everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Girls.
Thanks, Marty.
All right.